Hello and welcome to another episode of Elevate, a DBNC leadership podcast where we have conversations with non-traditional and diverse leaders. Enjoy! My name is Christian Fox, and today I am joined by a very special guest, Officer Peter Grant. Peter, how are you today?
Good morning. I'm great. Thank you.
Good. Thank you so much for being here. I'm really looking forward to our discussion.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, so why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your work as a constable with the Peel Police.
Okay, so for myself, my parents immigrated here from Jamaica in the mid-'70s. Spent most of my formative years in the Peel region, grew up there, went to high school there. I'm the father of three. And right now I'm just working in Peel Police. My journey's been an interesting one with Peel Police. I started in 2002 as a special constable in court services. And my job there was bringing people to and from court and listening to their court trial. And I really gained a fulsome view of the experience, on the greater Peel and kind of people's circumstances that are finding themselves in trouble with the law. I later transitioned into frontline policing, where I had that firsthand view to really see where the rubber hits the road and how things are occurring and what kind of circumstances are out there for people. And both of those experiences have really influenced my passion for what I'm doing now in more of a community outreach role, where I have a chance to engage with people, educate, inform, and hopefully reduce that victimization or the risk of them getting caught in that cycle of the judicial system.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that sounds like very interesting work, and I'm so curious to hear more about the community role. But when you think about your work, what do you enjoy the most about the job?
Policing is interesting where when you look at, community safety or why people want to be a police officer to help people, there's so many different ways to do it. So regardless of your passion, you can find a role that really suits your personality, and that can change over the years. So right now in the community outreach role, my personal passion is working with youth, identifying some of the most vulnerable, those that are at risk, and trying to upstream them. There's nothing more rewarding than hearing from a parent or a youth after the fact of saying, hey, meeting you's been impactful, and really appreciating that mentorship and seeing the need that our youth really have. I feel like that's really the portion where you can make the most difference. That's the most influential spot in someone's life. So those inroads are very valuable.
Yeah, that sounds incredibly important because I feel like when you talk about policing, when you hear about it, especially when you see it on TV, you don't really get that sense that, there's a whole other aspect of it of trying to help people before they get in trouble with the law. It's usually, okay, there's a bad guy, they got to go arrest them. So what you're talking about, I think, is so fundamental, and it's great that you're doing that work.
No, absolutely. It's an underviewed area in policing, and even traditional law enforcement specialists really just look at the after an incident occurs. But there's things that are happening before. And if we can upstream that, no one's getting victimized, no one's getting caught in the judicial system. So there's a whole area that can have a significant impact.
Yeah, that's huge. So what do you find are the most challenging aspects of the position?
Challenging in policing is just the constant change. We have to be so adaptable to, changes in society, changes in crime trends, changes in technology, and trying to keep up to speed with all of that can be onerous. You can never be stagnant. You never just figure it out one day, and policing's easy. It's constantly changing, evolving, growing, learning.
Right. Yeah, I can only imagine how much things change. What are the current trends today that you're noticing and working with?
Being more in the community perspective, I'm really doing more connecting with community partners and making sure I know which resources and services are out there to help people as those needs are at.
Yeah, so you were just talking about how, like, from your perspective, you're trying to talk to different agencies to see what the challenges are and what resources are needed.
Correct, because we realize policing can only do so much. We can identify a need, but we don't have the resources to help. And this is where relationships with other community groups, community partners really come into play, and finding out who they are, who's able to provide that assistance, and connecting the people that need the help to the service.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's so important that you're connecting, because I think like again, often policing is, I don't want to say it's always viewed as something separate, but it's not often thought about as, okay, how is policing impacting other agencies and how are they connecting?
Correct.
So I think that's really great to be able to highlight that, you're also connecting with other agencies that are also on the ground to see, okay, what can we do? How can we help them?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so how do you find you're overcoming the challenges of constantly trying to stay with the current trends and understand, okay, how things are changing day to day?
Yeah, just really keeping an ear to the street, like listening to people, listening to the people that are at risk. It's the lived experiences that really, that's where the value is. Things look great on paper or in a textbook, but yeah, listening to people with the lived experience that have gone through the processes, that have tried to get help, where are they getting stuck? Also watching the news, we'll see trends occurring, on the other side of the world, but that's going to influence what's happening here. And it influences our immigration policies and how can we best support asylum seekers and, different areas like that. We got to keep up to date on, current on, and certainly prepared for.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And one of the things I'm always curious about is, 2020 was just a wild year. We had COVID, but there's also the tragedy of George Floyd. And, obviously in the U.S., policing has changed quite a bit. I'm a big TV buff, and so a lot of the police shows that I watch, they've even changed, which I'm actually really happy with. But I'm curious, how has that impacted policing in Peel?
It very much has. We saw a lot more oversight. It took a real deep dive into how we're doing things and why we're doing it that way. So policies, procedures, training has changed. But to a broader perspective, it was more the societal change that really influenced how we can evolve policing. So now with changes occurring in healthcare, with mental health supports, providing capacity to community groups to help marginalized and at-risk communities, that now has increased our opportunity to collaborate and create shared interventions to make sure we're helping people before they get into whether it's crisis or responding to a call for service. So it's really that broader scope of global change and societal change on a whole through all the major institutions.
Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And when you're talking about interventions, what are some of the common ones that you would use?
Well, we do have a framework right now that I really think was expedited through awareness of the George Floyd murder, but the Community Safety and Wellbeing Framework. It had been in the works for a while, but this is basically a platform that brings the major institutions, policing agencies, healthcare, all into a room, and the ability to share information, to collaborate proactively, and it reduces some of the red tape required to make sure we work together to support people at risk. So we have a situation table, and that's where, we'll identify an at-risk person that's identifying multiple risk factors. We sit down with a group of the community partners at the table. We identify non-identifying information. So it might be an age bracket or, just certain characteristics of the person. And the agencies with services that can support that type of scenario would step forward. From there, there's a sub-meeting where the subgroup gets together, collaborates on an idea, and intervenes within 24 to 48 hours to that person that's most at risk.
Okay, so that's just an individual person that you'd be meeting, that you'd be discussing and
Correct.
Trying to figure, okay, how can we help this individual?
That's right.
Now, are these individuals that have already had run-ins with the law, or they're very close to?
A bit of both.
Okay.
We can often see the writing on the wall. It could be someone who's, has, addiction issues, but also has some breakdown in the family structure. And these are some of the cues that we could see. All right, we're getting more calls for service, or, they're being found, more often in a state of distress. Mm-hmm. So these are cases where we say, hey, this is a trend that could lead to victimization or just a greater need for intervention if we don't do something early.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that sounds like a really, really good process, because I think, again, it's so focused on, okay, they did a crime, we gotta find justice, but you're actually helping them before they get there. Now, obviously you can't share specific details because I'm sure all of it's highly confidential, but are there any success stories that stick out in your mind?
Daily. We have success stories that range from even just calls for service being reduced on the frontline officers just through the work that we're doing. If someone's a frequent caller and all of a sudden they're not calling as frequently, that's a good sign for us.
Right.
We have other things where parents will reach out, or the individual themselves saying, hey, these supports have helped, things are going well. We check in on them periodically also. So yeah, daily we have these success stories. But again, it's difficult to measure because the success isn't really a statistic. If someone's not calling the police or we're not responding to a call for service, we don't know what we've prevented. So I think the success stories go far beyond what we're even aware of and are happening on a daily basis.
Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense because if somebody, doesn't call you, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's like a success, but you don't know why they didn't call you. So I guess that's very difficult to measure. But
Correct.
But that's good to hear that you're seeing a lot of success in that. And it seems like, is that something that's like catching on beyond Peel that other agencies are doing or other police agencies are doing?
Absolutely. We're actually having visits from several police agencies, just wondering how we're doing things. We're very proud of our process in Peel, and we're continually growing and improving the way we do things and evolving. So yeah, there's a lot of interest. We get a lot of positive feedback from the community, our community partners. I think, namely after the George Floyd incident, there were some barriers for police in certain areas, and just rebuilding those relationships has felt good. Rebuilding that trust and starting to collaborate together is really starting to take shape now.
Yeah, that's great to hear. And it's great to hear because I just feel like there's still a lot of negativity around the police. And I feel like maybe it seems like maybe there is, like, you are getting more credit now. But I feel like just as a society as a whole, I feel like there's not a lot of acknowledgement that, hey, the police are really trying to change. And I think that's huge.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to grow wary of just thinking, hey, we've made it. I'd like to always be challenged to improve. I think that's how we get better as a society. So I have a lot of room for the criticisms and some of the negative feedback. I'll take that in, and we work together with that as a team. But certainly the individual relationships that we're building and some of the face-to-face, that's where you get the authentic feedback. Social media, it's very easy to just have trolls and negativity and just people that just have that one sole mandate of just saying something negative or to anyone. But aside from that, I'd like to keep being challenged, and it'll keep us in the right direction for sure.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's good to hear that it's like, you don't ever want to get complacent and say, hey, we nailed it. We're perfect. We don't need to change. But the fact that you're like, hey, we're improving, but we can keep improving and keep getting better. I think that's huge.
Absolutely. I think that mentality is what set us back in the first place. This is how policing's done. This is how we've always done it. And those are very dangerous words that we're learning.
Yeah, exactly. And this is very similar, but you brought up social media. And so that, always makes me think that it's new technology. It's becoming more and more common. How are you finding how technology has improved? How has that changed the landscape of policing?
Yeah, I don't want to age myself too much and just talk about the negatives because yes, it is such a, from a victimization standpoint, it is such a haven for human trafficking. We see a lot of cyberbullying that has mental health impacts. We have the frauds and scams that are just continually affecting people in the community, right? So there's a lot of negative. However, being able to use social media to get a message out there to find a missing person or to share, safety information and access people in communities that otherwise wouldn't be able to get that information from the police or get, current valid information, I think is important as well. So it's that fine balance of the good with the bad, but it certainly has challenges.
Yeah, the social media thing is just like, I don't want to date myself either, but it's like when I was in high school, we could text and we would use MSN. Sometimes we'd use Facebook. But I don't know how kids are coping today in a world where everybody's messaging, everybody's online, and the mental health situation because of that and the trolling and the cyberbullying. It's out of hand. And I just can't imagine how difficult it is, even just being in school, but I can't imagine how difficult it is in the world of policing and when you're seeing the more serious consequences of that.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think my mind really goes out to the youth, though. If you think about a prank being played on school back in our day, perhaps.
Yeah.
whoever was there saw it. I might talk
Yeah.
about it till Friday. By Monday, it's gone.
Yeah.
But now a prank that has some embarrassing impacts for someone, that's just in perpetuity going to haunt them for
Yeah.
a while. So, that's a challenging circumstance that I've never had to experience. So.
Yeah. So how are you dealing with that, and how is the police trying to address some of those concerns?
Education. It's really connecting with parents to make sure they're monitoring their youth online. Talking to youth about the dangers of sharing information, because there are some very tragic horror stories of some of the negative impacts of the misuse of social media. It could be even just a prank or some stupid comment about, doing something at school or to a teacher. Like, these things have serious impacts that can impact the youth's future as well. So yeah, really the education piece is big. Monitoring our children's use of social media is going to be important as well. And yeah, just staying on top of the trends and technology for sure.
Yeah, I think that's huge. I think education's critical and staying on top of the trends, because even again, I can't even believe as soon as TikTok came out, it was just social media changed forever. And now it's a whole different thing. So I think that's so important to stay on top of the trends.
Absolutely.
I think that's the right thing. Now I wanted to shift gears a little bit because I wanted to ask you, from your perspective, what are some of the unique challenges that you've faced being a police officer, but also being a black male?
Yeah, no, some very interesting challenges. I kind of call it the insider-outsider dynamic. I'll be working in the community with the black community, and there's that trust, familiarity, connectivity that we have. But I can see those moments of pause where it's like, oh, but you're an officer. And I kind of have to justify that identity. Conversely, internally, I have, I'm in the policing institution, very tight-knit group. However, in those spaces, I feel that the intersectionality of my, being a black male is lost at times, where it's just not really understood that, yes, I'm police. However, there's other sides of me. So I feel there's a little bit of a disconnect, and there's times where I don't really feel in a group or having to explain kind of how I can be both.
And how are you how do you find you navigate that when you get into those situations internally where you feel like there's a disconnect there?
Yeah, so it's been a growth process. Earlier in my career, didn't have much confidence to say much or do much. It was just more, go with the flow. But now certainly I'm willing and prepared, and it's my duty to have those conversations, those challenging, honest, productive conversations to either educate, inform, build the cultural competence of, a peer, for example, that just may not know. So I think taking the time to do that is important. And again, it's based on that experience and wisdom that you kind of obtain over the years, but certainly responsibility that I have to myself, but also for the next younger black officer that can't advocate for himself in the appropriate way because of the pressures.
Right. And are you finding that, generally speaking, they're people are receptive to that?
Yeah, 1,000,000%. 1,000,000%.
That's good. That's always good to hear.
Yeah, it's really having those difficult conversations. It's what I've done to rebuild relationships in the community with community groups that once had a arm's length from us, but having that candid dialogue, accepting, there's a learning curve, accepting just the differences and that people just need to learn and be prepared to have those conversations. I really do feel like that's the key to breaking down a lot of what's dividing our society and making everything just so polarized. It's one way or another. And there's no, don't forget, there's a lot in between.
Yeah, I think that's huge. That's what I always tell people, is that it's just, you need to have the conversation and let's be honest. Let's obviously be respectful, but yeah, those conversations need to happen so that people can understand, okay, where are you coming from and what am I missing? And I think that's huge. And I'm glad that, that some of those relationships have been able to be rebuilt through conversation.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's huge. And then when you're dealing with a community and they're like, but you're black, but you're also an officer, how do you go about that and try to address their concerns that, well, but you're an officer and you're not going to believe me because you're a police officer?
Yeah, really, it's bringing the humanity back into it, where this is me now, but in about, 2-3 hours, I'm off duty, right? Am I still an officer then when I'm, in my car? Or I think about representing and my concern being for those that I'll think of a nephew or a niece, right? How do I want them to be served? They don't have the benefit or privilege, I'll even say, of, being a police officer. I want to make sure the community's safe out there for them as well, and they have the resources, and I do want to advocate for those at risk. So it's just the candid conversations about my experiences, acknowledging the experiences of others and accepting the role that policing and other major institutions have had in some of the oppression and disproportionality that's taken place around that, but then setting a stage to how do we best move forward. And one of the keys has really been to having things led by the community, led by those that are, have experience with the lived experience, because my intersectionality can take me away of a lot of that. Even as a Black officer, I can't fully attest to having like the full experience of the authentic Black man who's living in Peel region, because I have the benefit of knowing I'm an officer. I have certain education about my rights and this, there's different factors and intersectionalities that kind of remove me from experiences that others may have. So I have to be prepared to learn and listen, even though I'm a Black man. Yeah.
And so you're saying, so what are some of the initiatives that you said that were led by the community in this?
Well, I'll tell you, there's one that's just recently launched, and you'll probably be hearing about it soon as well. We have a Countering Hate initiative. So this is a community-informed and community-led initiative where we brought together 27 different community groups from all sorts of different intersectionalities to develop a module that's aimed at countering hate in the community, addressing hate crime, hate incidences, resources to deal with extreme violent extremism as well, and just making sure the community is informed and knows that Peel is inclusive. We do not tolerate hate. How do I report it? What do I do? So again, just the process in developing this platform, listening to the community, supporting the community, and building a model that's sustainable and capacity building for others to share it within their groups is just a key example of collaboration at its finest, and really joining voices and sharing in that responsibility of public safety, inclusivity, and building a safer community.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds like a really good initiative. And where can people find out more information if people are listening right now and are curious about that?
Absolutely. They can email directly to the police at dei.peelpolice.ca. We also have some other emails that I don't have with me right now, but it is community-led, and we can certainly put you in contact with the coordinator of this of this initiative, and we can arrange for training. We could arrange for train the trainer, and we want to build the capacity for community groups, community members to be able to share this within their networks as well. And that's with police alongside them or autonomously on their own. We just really want the information out there, and the essence is going to be to build that trust, confidence, inclusivity, and safety.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds like a really good initiative. And we'll put all the links there and all the information, because I think, that's such a valuable resource. And
Great, thank you.
I think something that once people start doing it, and once, we can definitely see a change.
Absolutely.
So when you're thinking about policing in your own journey, what advice would you have to, say, another Black individual who's listening right now, or they're thinking about policing and they want to take the plunge and actually do it?
I absolutely would encourage it. I really want to see that continuation. I really want to see the representation. I know the impact that I have going into certain spaces, and it's important to continue that for generations to come. So yeah, it's a great career. It comes with challenges, but not like any other space that you've learned to kind of navigate through if you've grown up, in this area, right? There's challenges in all institutions. So it is a work in progress, but we are on the way there. So I would encourage definitely anyone with the inclination to pursue it. There's a lot of different ways to make a difference. Like I mentioned earlier, if you're physically inclined, we have tactical units. If you're scientifically inclined, we have forensics and other areas like that. If you just like your investigations, we have that as well. Everyone has something to offer. And it's really that strength in diversity where regardless of your skill set, there's a role for you in policing and a way you can help.
Yeah, I think that's very cool, and I think because when you were talking about that earlier, the fact that there really is something for everyone there. 'Cause I feel like people have this idea that you need to be like, you're going to have to work these long shifts, or you're going to have to do the one thing, and if you don't like it, well, it's too bad. But it sounds like there are different avenues,
Absolutely,
which I think is great.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you do start with the long shifts.
Yes, yeah,
you are exposed to a lot initially. But
Mhm.
that kind of helps you find your way as well. You might come in with one certain impression, or your life circumstances may be such that you want to work in one area, but then you realize, hey, I've really connected here. This is really more for me. And the biggest turning point that I usually hear for people young in their career is once they realize, like, you don't have to be the best at everything, but you can find your thing, and just be good at that. It's a bit of a relief. And also create some diversity in the career, right? Or some dynamic. It's careers within a career where you can start one place and it's like, hey, I'm ready for a new challenge, and then make a move somewhere else, and you're still internal. So that's one of the definitely fringe benefits of policing.
Yeah, I think that's really cool because I always wonder, like, okay, at what point does someone feel like, okay, they want to change, but how difficult is that to try and do something different within that world? But it sounds like that's a really good benefit of policing, that you can be doing one thing for a long time and then you're like, I want to try something different.
Yeah,
but without leaving policing.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's huge.
Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the things I'm always curious about, and actually, let me just pause for a second. I just want to see if there's anything that we haven't touched on yet. Oh, actually, you know what? I do want to ask another different question. So this is more of a fun question.
Okay.
If you were granted a magic wish from a genie, and this genie is 100% honest, no bunky paw stuff, no weird, like, you get your wish, but this also happens.
Okay.
Genie's
No catch.
very honest. What service or program would you create for the Peel Police?
All right. Well, if this genie was legitimate, we might not have the need for policing in society,
exactly.
right? So, but to play along, one of the big concerns for me and one of the big challenges, especially our frontline officers face, is compassion fatigue. It's going from call to call, dealing with, a very nerve-wracking, scary situation, frankly, to a horrific situation, to an incredibly sad situation. And every call, we're expected to adapt and treat the very next person we meet with the same amount of empathy, and it's really hard to regulate. And officers just tend to bottle it up, move on to the next one. But the overexposure to that, and again, the varying nature that's so hard to prepare for, just next time the radio goes off, you don't know what you're heading to, is a challenge. And I feel that more supports or more ways to identify just some of those challenges without that old school mentality of, just work through it, you'll be fine. Just more supports, because I certainly know it takes a toll, and we might not see it manifest itself on a daily basis, but it could be 5, 10 years down the road. And now, there's behaviors or someone's changed, and how do you pinpoint and how do you start repairing what was broken through the years of just ranging emotions, going back and forth from, stressful to, again, scary to incredibly sad, to then just roll it off and like, I have to move on to the next call.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that I can't even imagine how stressful it is. I know even in this job there is a level of, and I know a lot of our employees, like, 'cause we're all trying to help people and we're all dealing with people's problems, so there is a level of that. But generally speaking, when somebody calls, I have a really strong idea. I know what the issue is going to be most of the time.
Right.
But you're having to deal with the fact that you don't know what it's going to be. You're never sure. Yeah, as you said, when the radio goes off, you never know what you're going into. So when you say, like, I want more services to, or more programs to try and help alleviate that, what are you envisioning?
I haven't played it out that far. Just mental health support. Maybe a type of we do have some early intervention techniques and methods, but at the same time, just even a process. Maybe if it was a schedule thing where, hey, you identify this call had a certain stress level associated to it. Maybe you take 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes to yourself, decompress, and just have some self-care built into the job, almost based on what we're experiencing. Maybe more regular debriefs on calls where there's that time to process what has just been seen and heard. And we do it for major incidents, but maybe it should be maybe a part more of the fabric on a day-to-day call-to-call basis.
Yeah, I think like from what you're saying, that sounds like it'd be really beneficial just to like decompress and try and unpack. Okay, this is what we just witnessed. This is what we went into. Here's what happened. So one of the things I always wonder is how does that impact families? Because I can't imagine what that's like when you're in a high stress situation. Then you have to go home to your family who may not be able to relate to what you've just experienced.
Yeah, no, I think there's several studies out there that will show some of the physical and emotional impacts. Families can often get the brunt end of it, where again we're just dealing with so much, taking charge of so much, that tolerance levels depleted by the time you get home. And now how does that manifest? So certainly having, strong coping mechanisms is being encouraged right from the get-go, early in the career, just to make sure they're, keeping what's important. And yeah, just dealing with it as it goes on. But you never really know when that straw breaks, or, when behaviors could change so subtly. It's not till down the road you realize you're a different person.
Right. Yeah. So if you don't mind me asking, what is like, do you have like maybe a ritual or a process or a thing you do when you're off duty and you're like, this is what I do to decompress. This is the thing I look forward to.
For me, it's fitness, music, sports even. It kind of helps me unplug. Yeah. So yeah, I certainly take care of my self-care. We have great benefits as well. So, we can keep our, body right, and a lot of mental health supports for therapy, when needed and even before it's needed, right? So there's a lot of different tools available. It's encouraging each other to use it, making sure, our families are reminding us to, hey, just keep yourself well. So self-care is priority.
Yeah, self-care is huge. I find that like I love self-care. Music is a big thing for me. For whatever reason, I find I love the drive home. Yeah. And I put on music or a podcast, and that helps me decompress. And fitness is really good too. When I can get into the habit of it, I go up and down with it. Yeah. But yeah, that's definitely critical.
Yeah, for sure. No, for sure. And I know for me, when things are starting to go off the rails and I'm just not feeling my best self, I know that fitness is what's missing. And it's like, hey, get back to the gym. As basic as it is, or as simple as you want to do it, just pretty much go there and do something. And you get back into that habit pretty quickly.
Yeah, that's definitely true. Now, one of my favorite questions, I love to ask all of our guests this. Okay. If you could go back in time and talk to yourself when you were 16, what advice would you give 16-year-old Peter?
It's funny. 16-year-old Peter. 16-year-old Peter probably wouldn't listen to me. 16-year-old Peter was pretty, into himself. And, my parents gave me great advice. But, yeah, I wasn't about listening then. So I think the key for a 16-year-old or the 16-year-old self, for myself to have heard, would just be affirmation. You got this. You're going to be fine. You can do it. Just that positivity. The wisdom and experience, life, that's going to come. That comes on its own. So there are no shortcuts to it. I think everyone needs their own experience, but that positivity, encouragement, support just needs to be there, and the rest will come in its time for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I often think about that too, and that's a similar answer that people just like. There's something about being a teenager that you feel like everybody's against you, and I think sometimes, like I remember, it's funny because like even though I'm not a teenager and haven't been for probably 15, 20 years now, if my math is right. Yeah. It's like I still remember that feeling of, okay, you got to prove, and everybody just assumes you're the worst person because you're a teenager, or you're just doing that because you're a teenager. And I think hearing that, hey, you know what? You're actually pretty awesome. Like, believe in yourself, I think is so critical.
Yeah, and no, absolutely. And I've had the same experience. And when I look at now, I can truly appreciate, I don't feel like I was a teenager that long ago, but they're living in a different world with different pressures. So my experiences can't be applied to them in the same shape or form. Like, they're having their own experience. So we have to trust, we have to listen, we just have to be there to support. because every generation is going to go through it. You will lose touch with, within 20 years of who you were when you were 16, and the world is a completely different place. So the same rules don't apply.
Yeah. It's just wild to me. I'm like, it can't be that long ago. It was
I know,
only,
right?
2000. It wasn't that long ago.
I remember it. Yeah.
But then, yeah, when you start to like hear about how technology's changed, again, like going back to social media, the fact that, there was Facebook and YouTube was still there,
Right.
but it was different. But now it's like, man, all these kids are going through something completely different.
Yeah.
It's just amazing how quickly you do get out of touch, and you have to remind yourself of that.
Exactly. I remember when the argument was, when I was in, grade 9, I didn't have a cell phone. Yeah, the world's different. You know what I mean? Like, you need cell phones now. It's a tool that can be used for good. So just having that humility to understand that you don't know their experience is important, and just support. They'll figure it out. We always do, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but thank you so much for being here today.
No, thanks for having me.
It was a great discussion. I think there's just so much to think about and to really unpack.
Excellent.
When it comes to this, but thank you. I'll have to have you back to talk maybe like later when the initiative has been rolled out a bit more to see how things are going.
Yeah, absolutely, and we'd love to be back.
Yeah, thank you for coming.